Hello everyone, Zellerant here, and today I thought I'd take a look at common keys. It had been mentioned in one of my comments by somebody that I should take a look and kind of give my thoughts on different common keys. And the best way I think we can approach that is by looking at it on a character-by-character basis, because a lot of the things to do with common keys are going to be more related to characters in terms of how valuable they will be to your team, whether it's generically good or just good for that specific character. One thing we know right now is currently endgame is more of a DPS check, so a lot of common keys that look really good currently don't hold much value. But as we've seen with the last video, or basically the blog post Pridewind has on all upcoming updates from the developers, is that they do want to increase the difficulty of endgame or make it more so not just a straight DPS check like what we currently have. So with that, I could see there being more strategy needed in terms of being able to CC as well as prevent certain mechanics from happening based on certain actions with your characters, which will increase the value of some common keys here in the future. And so the first character I was thinking of taking a look at will be Qiongjiu, as she is the one of the most popular standard units of all people, and currently to me the single strongest standard character when it comes to single target damage. And there is a lot of common keys that'll work quite well with her that you can get from a multitude of team members, as well as people you're going to want to pick up in the first place on your way to building your whole entire burn team anyway. But there are some outside of the burn team that you might want to look at, especially if we start seeing content on the CN side that requires more strategy in terms of CCing enemies. And so with that, we'll kind of get into it. And if you like my content, if you could like, comment, subscribe, it really helps. So let's start with Qiongjiu. The big thing is Qiongjiu, as we all know, is a support action user. All of her damage comes from reacting to other people doing damage and using her support actions. And right now, currently on the global side, you can do up to 4 support actions if you use her ultimate. We do not have her expansion key at this point, but the big thing is when we do get her expansion key in the future, which I'm expecting to be around when we get Vector most likely, because that's where it's going to have the biggest impact. Her expansion key makes it so that her support actions do burn damage rather than physical damage. And so that will make certain keys more relevant in the future that may not be relevant right now. So I look at the common keys that work the best on Qiongjiu. One of the big things that Qiongjiu wants is crit stats. Because if you can get her crit high enough where she's pretty much critting consistently, that is where she can pretty much maximize her damage. So you're going to want to prioritize that on her common keys. And that is one big thing you'll see right off the bat with her own common key, which you'll see with a lot of units. Their own common key is usually the best for them. And Qiongjiu is right off the bat, yes. Amazing for her. Crit 5%, absolutely wants, and then increases damage outside of one's action by 7%. So this one you're pretty much always going to want her on her, just because it's her specific key. It works great. And now we could potentially see one that surpasses it in the future, because I think there's like a solid 3 keys you specifically want for her. So we could eventually see this one get surpassed in the future, but for now, once you have her maxed out, you definitely want this key on her for sure. The other big one was on a unit that we had right off the bat that most people skipped, but she will be valuable just for her common key, specifically for Qiongjiu. And it's a really big one that I had skipped Ulrid in the beginning, but Ulrid has a common key that I would consider one of the best ones for her as well, as it basically works just like Qiongjiu's. It's the same thing where crit plus 5%. She gets the crit stat from that one, as well as before attacking, so before she does her support action, or if she doesn't attack. So this one isn't even specific to support actions, it's just before she attacks, so it can apply to her own normal attacks as well. If the target is not at full health, increases damage dealt by 7%. Now what makes this really nice is, one, if you're fighting a boss, like after the first person attacks them, they're not at full health, that 7% applies not only on support actions, but also when she does her normal attacks, if you do those. So this one, I would actually say, is better than her own personal one, because her personal one requires it to be outside of her own action. This one is going to do that 7% additional damage regardless, as long as they're not at full health. And the big thing, and why I would say this is actually better than her own as well, is she reacts to other people attacking an enemy. And that means someone attacks, she attacks. well, if the enemy's already been attacked by somebody else, they're not going to be at full health. So on her support actions, this is almost always going to be true that they're not at full health. The only times they will not be, or they will be at full health when someone else attacks first, is if they have some form of shield like that one that the mobs put on there where the target attacks them, it breaks the shield, but then they're at full health. That'd be the only situations where this one would not apply that 7%. But this one I would consider her second best of all the common keys that you can get for her, just because you're almost always going to get that flat 7%, as well as not just on support actions, but her own attacks. And so that brings to the case, now we're going to have to kind of look amongst what we currently have, and then I want to take a look at ones we'll be getting on future units. So Allred is going to be a perfect pickup for your burn team just for that alone. But the next one, and this is the one I currently have on her, and this is coming from Sharkry. And so one thing you have to think about too with these common keys is, while I'm putting these all on QJ, the other thing is you have a full team that she's built around. And so Sharkry's here, common key, this one has crit 3%. That's a negative, that's a 3% rather than a 5%. But there are better ones in the future that we can take a look at. But this right now, it gets the crit. And then if the user has more than one buff, increase is damage dealt by 7%. It has that 7% as well. And QJ has all kinds of ways to get more than one buff, especially when you're building it with the burn team. So this one's always going to be true pretty much with QJ. And so you're going to always get that 7% most, like 99% of the time activated, and you're also getting crit for it. And this is Sharkry's. Everybody should have at least one copy of her, hopefully, based on the polls they've done so far. If not, well, you'll eventually get her at some point, and this is an easy pickup for her as well. And so that one's a good one there. Now, and the other big thing that I really didn't mention in the beginning, but with common keys, and this is something I always kind of forget since I have a ton of them because I've spent money, but these common cores are quite rare, especially for your free-to-plays, so you're having to be very, very picky on the common keys you get. So usually when it comes to going all the way through a character's skills to unlock the common key, you kind of want to have it on a character that you're also utilizing. That is kind of one of the negatives of Allred, in that I know a lot of people, like I plan to get her specifically for the common key, but she'll only really get use on the PvP side for me, so I won't get as much value out of the character Allred herself, but the common key is that good, I think, for QJ, that I think it is worth it in a lot of cases, especially if you're going to fully build up that burn team. And then also open up common keys for your other units as well. But Sharkry is going to be a great one, because Sharkry is a great unit too. Sharkry right now, when we get QJ's expansion key that makes it where she does burn damage, and when you eventually get her V3, you can trigger the Sharkry support actions just as easy with QJ. And so she's going to be a great one to max out anyway, because Sharkry is going to be getting the most used SR unit of all of them. And so there's no concern on, I would say, wasting your common cores investing in Sharkry, because she's actually that good of a unit. And so that one is a good one to pick up. Now we look at some others. There's a lot of situational ones. One of the big ones I have, and this really depends on if you have the common cores for it, because right now I haven't seen the situation arise needing it, but I do like Krolix in that if there is this situation, you can completely nullify it, which is she has the a crit 3% buff on it, but then it has, if the user has burn type buffs, which QJ almost has a majority of the time, they are immune to chill and solidification, and it increases damage dealt by 5%. The big thing is that it gives them that immune to chill and solidification. So if we have a boss or any strategic content where that is a main mechanic, this is a way to have a unit that can completely negate that action. And you can see that with another unit as well. I believe the newest fire burn unit here, she has that built into her kit as well, if I'm not mistaken. So if you can get your whole burn team built around being able to ignore mechanic like that in the future, that's always nice to have. Big thing negative with Krolix, though, is that she is not as valuable as a unit currently. One of the lower used ones. She's good in some content, but at this point she's just not tanky enough, and she's exposed 90% of the time when using her, because right now I've built her up. and she dies so easy even in the platoon battles when I've used her. And so that's kind of one negative, but I could see her common key having value in the future at some point because it has everything you want for her. Now we take a look at some of the other ones here. The big ones I want to look at are like all the other burn units. And so we have like Vector here. Vector, you're going to end up maxing out. Big negative on hers is it's not a crit. It's an attack plus 5%. When it comes to QJ, I'm pretty much always going to skip those ones for her. And the big thing is, yes, you can get an attack by 8% if they have burn type debuffs, which they will with her. This one, you just put this on Vector. If you have Vector, you're going to be using Vector alongside QJ. So even though this one might be good for QJ, except the fact that it has attack plus 5%, this is a common key that you're going to put on Vector because Vector is going to do some damage of her own as well. And so that one is an easy skip in terms of putting it on QJ, but you will eventually want this common key because Vector is a core member of the burn team. You kind of see this the same thing with Shahua here. That she has a common key that when dealing burn damage outside of one's turn, which is something that QJ does, increases damage dealt by 10%. So you think, oh, that's 10% versus a 7%. That's great, isn't it? Well, it doesn't have that crit on it. And so this is one that when we eventually get her, and this is like a year down the road, so this is thinking long term, this is not a common key I'm going to put on QJ, simply being that this one's going to be better suited for Chahua. Now, I have not gone over her kit yet. I plan to do it at some point in the near future. But it looks like she relies less on being able to do crit and is going to be more focused on just doing straight big damage, especially when it comes to her other, because this one's a straight 10%. This one is not a after support action, and she has other stuff in her kit that does big damage, and the most specific one being her Scorch Mark. And so like this one, yes, you're going to eventually get this one, but this one's not going to be good for QJ. Just keep it on her. Because she's going to be a core member of your team when she comes out anyway. And then there's another one that I've mentioned this before. It's one of my favorite common keys of the group that I think is going to be generically good in the future, especially if they start making CC kind of content important. And that one is Lena's. I think Lena is a great unit to get just in general because of her CC. You'll see that a lot of people say she's not good, and that is just straight up because right now in-game content is a DPS check, and she is a crowd control unit. And that is where her common key is actually really good as well. The big thing is it does have the crit plus 5%. So right there, just that alone, great for QJ. But then after that, if you're fighting some enemies, so say they add content that adds a lot of elite units that can be CC'd, and they do a lot of damage, so you definitely want to CC them if you're not going to be able to kill them off the bat. You have, when the target deals single target damage, it will apply conductance on the target for 1 turn, and that can be activated twice per turn. What this can effectively do alongside QJ is with your burn team, you have other people that'll follow up as well. You have Synergies, you have a Kohua, or Chahua, man, I am just terrible at names. But you have these units that also do their own support actions that it can attack after. And what that can do is if you put conductance on the enemy with this one, you can basically paralyze them for a turn, because what it effectively does is when the holder receives damage, it then gets converted to paralyze the unit. So it can be a way to paralyze units multiple times with QJ. One person attacks them, QJ does her support action, and then another unit attacks after that, and that will basically paralyze them. And you can do that on 2 units. So once CCing becomes important, which I think it will be based on their comments, I think this is going to be a great, it's still situational, but I think it's going to be a great common key because you're still getting that crit that you want on QJ. She can do multiple attacks per turn, which then means she can also put conductance on 2 units. So we have that one that is great. Now, those are like the main ones I've looked at. There are other ones that you can get. Pretty much anything with crit is going to be good. Those are the main ones that I want. So another one that we just got is going to be, if you did pulver her, Dayan. She has one that is also good, and this is one that I currently use it on Dayan, but depending on the fights, if it's going to be something difficult enough and I need more movement, this is going to be a good one for QJ because it gives that 5% crit, and as well as giving her movement increase for 1 turn, basically every other turn. So just a little bit more movement to help get QJ in better situations. The big thing you'll want to do is getting her high up. And there has been a couple times, it's not often, but there's been a couple times where it's like one more movement would have got me where I could have got up on a tower above, where then she could shoot down on the enemies and do significant amount of damage. And so just this one, while situational, is another good pickup for her. This is one that I would not say pull Diane for. If you're skipping Diane, that's fine. I think Diane's is situational enough. While I really like it, I think it's a really good common key, not just for QJ, but anybody in general. I don't think it's worth pulling Diane specifically just for the common key. And the same that I would say with like Lena and Ulrid. I think Ulrid's is absolutely great for QJ and probably her best common key out there. And then Lena's just really good just in general for all units, not just QJ. And because Lena's awesome, the one thing I forgot to mention on Lena's, what this also can open up is if down the line you eventually do get a V6 Mosin Nagant, which over time could be potentially happen with lost 50/50s and all that. Her V6 makes it where if a team member does a electric debuff, it makes it where she will then do her own support action. So rather than having to wait for them to be stability broken, she can do support action based on electric debuff, which then makes Lena's common key make Mosin Nagant actually a great unit to pair with QJ. And so those are some things you can think about in the future as well with reruns. If you skip Lena now, maybe you want to pick her up in the future if you keep losing 50/50s and somehow get to a V6 Mosin Nagant. But I think those are the main ones. We have some others kind of taking a look at them. Those are the main ones I've thought of. I think everything else is pretty much an attack percent ones, and you really want that crit on QJ. You want to try and get as close to 100% crit you can. And then you have Faye here, who has a crit plus 5%. She will be a free unit we get down the line, most likely, because they got her for free on the CN side, and she gets added into the CN banner. The big negative is increases physical damage received for all enemies within 3 tiles, radius of self for 5%. I think this is going to be a great common key for a physical built team. But QJ, once you have the expansion key, it converts it to burn damage, so that is not going to help her at all in the future. So that one's kind of not that good for her. And then everything else pretty much does not, is no interest, because I think everything else pretty much at this point is attack percent. And yes, I believe I am correct there. Yeah, I mean, you have, yeah, I guess... Litera has a crit plus 3%, increases damage dealt by 7% towards enemies with defense type debuffs. That's a little bit more specific. While it can help, it's nothing too crazy to worry about actually using your common cores if you're not going to use her, which I don't think many people are there. But yeah, to try and not make this video too long, we'll kind of call it here. But those are kind of the common keys. I think the biggest one's going to be QJ's personal one, for that just flat 5%, 7% more damage. Ulrid's will be the 5% crit, another flat 7% damage that you're pretty much always going to have. And then at the point in the future when we get them is going to be either like Lena's, Diane's, or what was the other one I was thinking of? Or at this point you can use Chartreuse. Just something that adds that extra damage and gives you that crit. Because getting that 15% crit is going to be really nice in terms of doing the overall damage. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know if there's anything else that I may have missed or some other common keys that you're thinking of that would be good on QJ. But yeah, if you like my content, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.